Disney was in a crazy and stressful period in the 80s, but the new management was actually working well and stuff was getting back under control, at least for the most part. People really didn't like Jeffrey Katzenberg. He was strict and controlling and all of that. And I mean, he almost got part of your world taken out of The Little Mermaid after test audiences reacted badly to it.
Oh, what? Oh. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, it was boring. Just
barring all those minor hiccups, Disney was moving into their most successful period yet, with films that are still fan favourites today. They were greatly helped along by Disney's new shiny toy, the CAP system developed by Pixar. With the help of the new tool, they were able to make films cheaper and they were able to paint and ink digitally. But unlike xerography, it didn't actually make their films look worse. In fact, it made them look great. On top of that, it made using CGI effects and characters a lot easier, and it also digitized the multiplane camera that was used to make parallax in Disney films. So while everything wasn't going amazingly, with The Rescuers Down Under not doing that well and the first 20 minutes of Beauty and the Beast having to be scrapped and redone, audiences were loving Disney's return to musical, fairy tale storytelling that brought them so much success in the past. But at the same time, the world was changing. Pixar had started to make their own 3D animated films, and Jeffrey Katzenberg had left Disney to go and make DreamWorks, after pretty much everyone in the company, even the management, made their dislike for him very clear. I mean, the management even announced an entirely new animation building without even telling him. Audiences were also starting to gravitate more towards 3D animation, which was seen as new and exciting. But Disney didn't care. They were too busy enjoying the wild success of The Lion King and the other princess films that they put out at the time. Films such as The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, and Pocahontas. Well, not Pocahontas, that film did pretty bad. But anyway, as time went on, Disney was swimming in familiar waters, while also developing new technologies, knowing that even if a film flopped and didn't do well, they'd still be financially okay. Yeah, they had a few bad films here and there, but who cares? They were still doing great anyway. And this 3D thing is totally a phase, right? Everything was going great for Disney. They had loads of money, had lots of awards, and were finally back on their feet after constant money issues, strikes, and that dastardly Don Bluth pulling a Charles Minx on them, except for the character stealing part. But most importantly, people were starting to love Disney films again, and Disney were making films that would become a big part of their brand way into the future, because those live action remakes sure aren't gonna be.
Long live the king!
This my shit. All the girls stomp your feet like this.
But now other companies were not only catching up to them, but they were also overtaking them. And yes, Disney was a big company now, but as much as they would have liked to have thought that they couldn't be overtaken by other companies such as DreamWorks and Blue Sky were in fact overtaking them, and they were experimenting with new things in animation. But Disney also started doing their own experimentation in response to this, as we move into the post-Renaissance era. The 90s and the early 2000s were a time of change and innovation for the world. The first resident members of the International Space Station were settling into their new homes in November of 2000, and in 1990 the World Wide Web was created. As the world was changing, so was Disney. They saw their competition pushing ahead, but they also innovated in their own way by putting out Fantasia 2000, which was their first ever IMAX film. They then put out their first ever sci-fi film, immediately followed by another sci-fi film, and they also put out a film that had CGI characters in a live action world, which they actually claimed at the time was animation and not live action. But most of them didn't really do that well, so Disney started incorporating CGI into their films, with an example of one of them being Deep Canvas in Tarzan, which basically allowed for artists to draw in 3D. They then developed virtual sets, which brought the budget of Treasure Planet up to a crazy amount, but allowed them to do some really impressive rotating shots, and also make a film that totally flopped financially, which Brother Bear helped to recover despite it not being a critical hit itself. although the final straw for Disney and the last film that they made before going all in CGI was Home on the Range. Many people consider this to be Disney's worst film, although I think it's an okay film. Either way though, this was a critical and financial failure for the company, and Disney took this opportunity to blame the failure of this film on hand-drawn animation, essentially leaving hand-drawn animation behind and moving fully into 3D, as they left their hand-drawn animation past behind them. And what better way to start than with Chicken Little, which was a horrible pile of rubbish, which somehow made its money back anyway. And speaking of horrible piles of garbage, John Lasseter was brought into the company, so he was now in the management of both Pixar and Disney. So I'm not really going to be talking about the stuff that he did in this video or the next video, although he basically did some pretty bad things to women, but just know that I'm not endorsing him in this video or the next video, and it's just that he's a big part of the company and I kind of do have to talk about him. Because after scrapping half of Meet the Robinsons and making a few other story changes, he basically put the company back on track as we move into the revival era. The Princess and the Frog was released in 2009. This was a story about a princess who kissed a frog and turned into a frog, and it was a big departure from their previous film, which was a film about a dog who thought he was a super dog. And just like clockwork, once Disney started going back to princess stories, people once again started to fall back in love with these stories, making Disney a whole load of money once again. They brought back role model characters such as Judy, and also started making more moral-based stories, which were also a big part of the Renaissance era. But most importantly, they went back to doing princess stories. In the Renaissance era, Disney has finally found its place when it comes to making animated films, and nowhere is that more clear than in WreckIt Ralph, Ralph Breaks the Internet. WreckIt Ralph, Ralph Breaks the Internet is a very important film for Disney. It came out to average reviews for a Disney film and was quickly overshadowed by the critical sensation that was Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. In my eyes, however, WreckIt Ralph, Ralph Breaks the Internet really marks the height for Disney. Not because of anything that Ralph or Vanellope did, although I did enjoy all of that, but because of this scene. This scene reminds me just how far Disney have come from its humble beginnings to the monster of a company that they are now. Yes, Disney is trapped into making princess films, or films that have a similar feel to princess films, but with WreckIt Ralph, Ralph Breaks the Internet, Vanellope realised that she was a princess and took it in her stride, and Disney are now doing the same thing. They realise that where they should be is actually where they started. Disney are trapped into making fairy tale princess films and are basically in a princess trap. But now that they understand that and they embrace it, their animation department is soaring. And as the Frozen 2 release date approaches and the new CCO, Jennifer Lee, who was the director of Frozen 1 and Frozen 2, takes over from John Lasseter, it doesn't look like Disney is going to, or even wants to, escape their princess trap anytime soon.